All right, welcome back to another episode of the Just Win podcast. We are just finishing week two of voluntary. Sorry, let's start over. No, we're starting week two of organized team activities, right?
Actually, I think it's week three, because they start rookie minicamp.
Okay. All right, welcome back to the Just Win podcast. We are finishing week three of OTAs. Tashan Reed is our boots on the ground. He's been there watching these guys practice. What are they looking like so far?
Yeah, I mean, today is, they kind of have the same structure every day. A lot of it is kind of split half and half. They start off with, individuals like everybody else, but the team drills, they pretty lean pretty heavily on the starters. You don't see too much of a lot of people ask, like, for example, let's say Cam Miller, the third string, fourth string quarterback. Like we don't really get to see him too much in team drills until the very end of practice. They do like a rookie session where guys kind of, they give the guys who are at the bottom of the depth charts some time to run out there. But it's been, I would say, pretty defense heavy so far. You don't see too many splash plays from the offense every now and then. Like today, Chloe Myers had a pretty nice one on a post route where he beat Eric Stokes for a touchdown. But as we talked about, I think in OTA it's pretty normal for the defense to be ahead at this point in the calendar, and that's mostly been the case, so far throughout OTAs.
Yeah, I mean, again, Chip Kelly's offense is there. Geno Smith is learning yet another system, three systems in 3 years. There's some young receivers, defense. There's a bit of continuity there. They're running Patrick Graham's system again. Obviously, there's going to be some changes with Pete Carroll being a defensive mind and having his philosophies kind of mesh with Patrick Graham. And he talked today. He talked about how he's like a sponge when Pete Carroll's teaching defensive backs because Pete Carroll is obviously a head coach. He's been a defensive coordinator in different stops before, but what he really loves is coaching defensive backs, and everywhere he's gone, that's the thing he gravitates towards. Even though he has a ton of other responsibilities, I've heard veteran coaches talk about like how when he teaches press coverage, their eyes or ears on them because he has so much insight on how to play those certain techniques. What did Patrick Graham talk about today? I know he was available to the media.
Yeah, so he kind of had an interesting offseason. People that don't remember, his contract actually expired after last season. That was something that, I mean, he's been through a lot of change since he's been here with the Raiders back in 2022. He was originally hired by Josh McDaniels and then was retained by Antonio Pierce. And I think he just wanted to give himself some flexibility in case things ended up not going well last season, which obviously they did not, with Antonio Pierce getting fired and then Tom Telesco getting fired and them only winning 4 games and defense took a huge step back. And, he's been a guy that's received plenty of head coach buzz back in, past years. And this offseason, he got another interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's kind of a weird situation. Like it seemed like it was sort of them manipulating the Rooney rule in order to use him as an interview, but they did follow up to interview him for their defense coordinator position after that. And so it wasn't a guarantee that he was going to be back with the Raiders this year with this new regime. It's rare you see any coordinator make it through 3 regimes, but the Raiders wanted him back. Max Crosby was really adamant, about wanting him back as defensive coordinator, even though they were coming off a rough year, and other players spoke up for him as well. But it really came down to that interview he had with Pete Carroll, in the offseason. And, as he spoke about today, I think a lot of the reason why he came back was, obviously there's the players that he's familiar with guys like Max Crosby and Malcolm Kuntz and Christian Wilkins and others. But I think he just really respects Pete Carroll's football mind. And Patrick Graham, I mean, he's a football junkie through and through. He's known as a Bill Belichick guy, but he's worked with Steve Spagnuolo and various other coaches as well, with plenty of defensive acumen. And Pete Carroll's another one of those guys. And I think the opportunity to learn from him and continue to grow as a coach appealed to him as much as anything. And so, it's early on in the process in OTAs. They keep it pretty vanilla out there. They're not showing us their full bag of tricks when it comes to schematics, but my sense is going to be a blend of the two. I don't think it's going to be as extreme as it used to be with Pete Carroll defenses back in the Legion of Boom era, where you pretty much know they're going to run cover three every time, and they don't care because they just think they're better than you and they're going to win. Which with that secondary, you could do something like that. But I think we've seen teams go more away from those kind of static single high defenses in recent years. Like you really don't see a team play that way anymore, and I don't think the Raiders are going to be like that now. I think they're going to continue to mix up their coverages on the back end and mix up their fronts as well. They've used a lot of 4-man fronts and 5-man fronts, and so I think it's going to be a lot of what you come to expect from Patrick Graham. A lot of variety on defense, but there are going to be some of those core Pete Carroll principles that you know him for as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because Pete Carroll and Patrick Graham, they kind of have kind of opposite philosophies as far as what they've done in their career. Because Pete Carroll's obviously he's been a cover three guy, and that's what he's kind of built his whole philosophy on, is being simple but doing the simple things very well. That's what the Legion of Boom did. But obviously, you need a talent. If you're going to be simple, you need a talent to be able to do it. And then there's obviously advantages to it because you're not thinking, you're playing. And then in the last couple of years, he tried to change that philosophy, going to that Vic Fangio style of defense, and they didn't have a lot of success doing it. Whether it's personnel or whether it's the coaches he hired that couldn't properly install that type of system. The Seattle Seahawks were really bad on defense in this last couple of seasons there, which is one of the reasons why he was fired from Seattle. Whereas Patrick Graham, he's been extremely open to trying new things, and his scheme has really catered around his talent. And a lot of coaches talk about that. Every single coach in every press conference is going to be like, "We're not going to run a system. We're going to run, whatever fits our players best," and they end up running whatever they want. But Patrick Graham's really been that guy who's really changed his philosophy from team to team, and even with the Raiders, it's been extremely different every single year. So I think what's going to happen is I think they're not going to be all of a sudden this cover three heavy team. Every team runs cover three, but I think what Pete Carroll is going to do is help him streamline his system and really find things that they want to do, and then just be able to add great techniques to what they do. Be able to create a system where they can effectively communicate and maybe streamline some things. But I still think Patrick Graham is going to be, obviously have a ton of say. I don't think Pete Carroll's going to come in and say, "You're going to run what I want to run." So I think it's going to be an interesting marriage of philosophies and ideas, and it's going to be one of the things I watch out for most as someone who watches the whole NFL. Just seeing that Patrick Graham, New England, really, chameleon type of philosophy meld with Pete Carroll, who I don't think Pete Carroll's going to come in and just say, "Do whatever you want," like the last 2 years in Seattle. I mean, it just didn't work out. So there's going to be a marriage. Patrick Graham's going to be the one calling the plays, but it's going to be really interesting to see what they come up with when the season starts.
Yeah, and I think, the things that Pete Carroll's known for, that press man coverage and cover three, like it's stuff that the Raiders already did last season, right? I think according to True Media, they were 13th in man coverage rate and they were 11th in cover three snaps. And so it's not like these are things that they just never did before, so they might do it a little bit more, but it's not like they have to start from scratch when it comes to the principles that they're installing. And I think really more so the question I have about the defense isn't really about the coaching. Like I think you know what to expect from Patrick Graham and Pete Carroll and Rob Leonard and some of the other assistants that they have on staff, but it's the personnel. Do they have the guys they need to execute that system? And Christian Wilkins, he still isn't practicing as he's recovering from foot surgery, and then also, Adam Butler hasn't been practicing the last couple of weeks. We haven't had the chance to talk to Pete Carroll to get an official reason why, and these are voluntary OTAs, so can't say for sure whether it's injury related or not. But most of the guys are out there at this point, and Adam Butler, he just signed a new deal, so he doesn't have like a contractual reason. So it's probably some sort of injury. Don't really have much insight yet about whether it's something that's more serious or not. But I think the defensive tackle room is a question mark. I think the linebacker room is a question mark. We got to talk to Landon Roberts for a bit today, and he's a guy that has had a lot of success in the past as a Mike linebacker, as a run defender, but really been a question mark in pass coverage. I think he's looked pretty good in OTA so far in pass defense. Again, it's all kind of half speed at this point, kind of glorified walkthrough, so I wouldn't read too much into it. But that the depth at linebacker beyond him is a huge question mark. And then at cornerback, I think they have some guys with some interesting skill sets like Darian Porter and Jacorian Bennett, but how is that room going to come together collectively? You're really not sure, and so they have some pretty big questions at all three levels of the defense, and so that's more so like if this defense isn't good this year, I don't think it's going to be could be because Patrick Graham and Pete Carroll don't see eye to eye. I think it's going to be just because they don't have really that much elite talent on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, there's just too many questions on defense to really expect this unit to be a top 10 type of unit, but they have to be passable. Like they can't if they could finish somewhere around 20th in, EPA per play or points per drive, to me that would be a pretty big win with all the question marks. I mean, they lost all their linebackers. Um, their starting corner group on paper looks like one of the worst in the league right now. Eric Stokes, potentially he could bounce back, but he just wasn't good in Green Bay. That's one of the reasons why he was let go. Darian Porter obviously is running with the ones right now, but as we know, he's gonna be a project. And even though you love the potential, like he might have a steep learning curve, and there might be a lot of mistakes being made if he ends up starting week one. It's interesting. Jacorian Bennett isn't running with the ones yet. I mean, I thought he had a really good year two before he was hurt. But that's just pretty much. Do you think it's just because he's working his way back from injury, and eventually he'll be working with the ones?
I mean, I don't think it's just because of the injury. I think that's part of it. According to his position coach, he said that last week that he's still working his way back from the shoulder injury. Like I think he's looked pretty good in practice, so I don't think it's like a statement against him, like he's performing poorly or something like that. But I just think there's going to be a competition there. Legitimately, like I don't think he's guaranteed to be a starter this year by any means. And we've talked ad nauseum about the types of defensive backs that Pete Carroll likes, and Jaquarian Bennett, he's a little bit shorter for a Pete Carroll DB. He's about 5'10". I think they list him at 5'11", but he's more so 5'10". And Darren Porter's that lanky 6'3" build, and even Eric Stokes is kind of in between 6 foot and 6'1". And so I think he's going to have to really ball out and separate himself from the other cornerbacks in order to get a starting spot with this defense. But really, like, I don't think, you mentioned it, like, just given this collection of guys that they have, like, I'd be shocked if we, see the same two starting cornerbacks, outside guys, the whole season. Like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be some sort of rotation early on in the year while these guys sort of get hashed out who's doing better than the others. And just in general, like, I know everybody, anything with the starting lineup, people are going to kind of freak out, but it is OTAs. Like, games are 3 months, over 3 months away now. So plenty of time for the depth chart to change, I promise.
Yeah, it is OTAs. So a lot of time, yeah, like the whole thing with Pete Carroll is competition, right? Like you mentioned, he wants to create that within the teams, within each position group. So who knows? There could be guys running with the ones just to light a fire under some other guy's ass. Like who knows right now? It's super early. But one thing that hurt the Raiders last season and Antonio Pierce last season was game management, and the Raiders really attacked game management and analytics this season with their hirings. And
So
you just
that's
wrote
like
an
music to
article
your
about
ears, man.
what was that.
You're overjoyed. We had that was a weekly segment on the podcast last
It
season. It was
was. I
just you
mean,
shitting on the game management.
some of the mistakes were pretty egregious. But Pete Carroll was not a great game manager himself at times. Um, I think when you're not good at something, it's okay, but you have to try to do something to rectify that. And just like Mark Davis, he was not doing a good job with some of the football decisions he was making. So he outsourced that to Tom Brady, who I think had a pretty big say in some of the offseason moves this season. And if you're not good at games management, a lot of the more forward thinking coaches are kind of outsourcing that to game management coaches, guys that really study this stuff and really have answers prepared for every situation. And it seems like that's the direction the Raiders are going, making some of the hires that they've made. Could you update us on how they beefed up their analytics department?
Yeah, so I wrote a story about this at the Athletic. It published on Monday. The Raiders already had a game management and analytics department. Like you won't really find a team in the league that doesn't. But the difference is they just invested more resources into it this offseason. That's the main change. And That started with hiring Mark Hughes, who is his official title is SVP of Football Operations and Strategy, and he has various roles within the front office. But one of them is heading up the analytics department. That's something that he did with the Denver Broncos for quite some time in his previous stop there. He was with the franchise for almost 15 years, I believe. And GM John Spicek, they use analytics a ton down in Tampa Bay, and that's something that on the front office side he's used to using. And so really is more so a change for Pete Carroll, just because again, the Seahawks had an analytics department under him, but it was relatively small. And when it comes to how much that was incorporated into their processes, it was not the biggest piece of the pie for him. And he talked about earlier this offseason, obviously last year he was out of coaching after getting let go by the Seahawks, and he said one of the biggest things he learned the value of was analytics and kind of the use of it. And it's not surprised that he's slow to it. I mean, he is the oldest coach in NFL history. He's going to be 74 this season. Like he's about as old school as it's going to get. And so all this stuff is relatively new for him, but he's been very open to it. And that's something that I got the chance to talk to Mark Hughes, and he expressed that Carroll's been receptive to it. And they actually hired a coach, or essentially a coach, Ryan Paganetti, who's going to work hand in hand with Pete Carroll throughout the season and throughout the offseason to sort of work these analytics into their game planning process. And I know analytics is a super broad term. Like basically, people when they hear that, they probably just think of fourth down decision making, but it's more complex to that. It's your run pass splits, trying to predict what type of plays another team may run, and then it also is incorporated into the team building process as well. When it comes to player modeling or trying to value contracts or draft picks or figuring out if you're getting fucked over in a trade or not. Like teams use data for all these things. And so the Raiders have hired a few different people this offseason and invested more into it. And one of the things they're working on now is they're going to create this database essentially that all their employees, or not all the employees, but all their football employees have access to, that has all their scouting reports and analytics and stuff like that they work out of. The Rams, Jordan Rodriguez has written a lot about their program called JARS. It'll be pretty similar to that. So it's all pretty new to them when it comes to this level of investment in it, and it's something that's still a work in progress. But they're leaning into it. And that's not just new for Pete Carroll, but I think it's new for the Raiders in general. Like I don't think Mark Davis has been much of a analytics guy in the past, but I think Tom Brady and some of the new ownership have gotten him more on board with it, and so we've seen that play out this offseason.
Yeah, and like obviously there's the game management aspect of it. And there's things that just help save coaches a ton of time that would have took them a ton of time in the past to research. Like, for example, let's say this defensive lineman, he always has his right hand up in a certain front in a certain situation, but when he has his left hand up, what does that mean? Like, you could get an analytics guy to research that, get you all the snaps from when he has his left hand up in a certain front, and that could tell you something, and may not tell you something. Maybe they have a certain blitz call where he slants a certain way, and that's why he has this different hand up. But you could get all that information, whether maybe like 10 years ago that would have taken you like, I don't know, like 10 hours of research and film watching to kind of figure that out. Now it'll take somebody in your analytics department like 5 minutes to put together like an entire playlist and give you like a report on what he's doing on this and when he's doing it. That's like an example of what analytics can do for you. But also, like you mentioned, it depends on whether you're going to use it. Like you could say you're going to use it. You could say that you're going to implement it and you want to be this forward-thinking coach, but you might end up being like a Mike McCarthy who faked like a whole year at PFF, and then when it comes to actual football, like he's going to run some sort of weird thing on that. I don't remember what play he ran on that Niner Dallas game that ended up losing the game for them. But we'll see. What happens when a bullet flies. But Pete Carroll is obviously doing the right things and saying the right things right now. So we'll see. But let's get into fan questions. First question from Perpetual Alien. What position battles are you guys looking forward to?
I think the biggest one probably on offense had to be left guard. Between Dylan Parham and also Jordan Meredith. I think Alice Kappa, like a maybe Caleb Rogers, the rookie, might get in the mix there at right guard. But I feel pretty confident Alice Kappa's going to end up being a starter at right guard. So I think that left guard spot. I'm interested to see between the two of those who wins out. I think receiver is a legitimate competition battle. I think Jacoby Myers is really the only guy that's locked in as a starter, and so Trey Tucker, Jack Besh, and Dante Thornton are kind of those three other guys in the mix to see if they're going to be starters on the offense. Defensively, I think linebacker, like right now, I would lock in Landon Roberts as a starter, but I think that will linebacker spot is up for grabs, and Devin White's probably your starter right now. Like I think ideally one of the young guys steps up, whether that's Tommy Eichenberg or Amari Gaynor or Cody Lindenberg. And then we talked about it already, but that cornerback battle is really a four-way battle between Stokes, Bennett, Porter, and then Cameron Richardson. So I think those are probably the four biggest battles. If you want to throw a fifth one in there, probably at defensive tackle. Wilkins' status is sort of up in the air. And if it is something that drags into the season, like who's going to be the guy that steps up? Like I think Adam Butler, if he's healthy, you could probably lock him in as one of the starters. But who else in that room? They kind of have this log jam of guys. Like who's going to step up there? And so those probably the five spots I'm looking at the most. But I don't know if you had any different ones.
You pretty much covered it, but I would say figure out who could be the third safety because if Jeremy Chin is going to play nickel, because nickel's such a big hole on this defense, it seems like Chin's going to play a lot of nickel. Who's going to be that third safety that plays deep when Chin is going to rotate down into the box? So that's another one.
Yeah, I think so. So far, it seems like it's been Lonnie Johnson Jr., who they signed. I believe he last played for the Panthers. He used to play for the Texans as well. He's sort of another big, lanky defensive back. But Jeremy Chin, he's going to move around a lot. I think he's the guy that can play nickel box safety, and seems like Lonnie is a guy that they trust, kind of filling in for him on the back end alongside Isaiah Polamau, who's going to be the other starter. So right now, at least so far, it seems like it's going to be Lonnie Johnson.
Yeah, and speaking of Pal Mal, next question is how is Isaiah Pal Mal looking? Is he pushing to start this year? Right now, he is a starter.
Yeah. I don't think there's any pushing really there. I think he's pretty much locked in as a starter. He pretty much just exclusively worked as a deep safety so far. Whether they're in two high or one high, which I think it sort of fits his skill set. Like he's not I wouldn't say he's like the fastest safety. I think he ran like a 4.5 coming out of college, and so. If they are in that kind of true cover three single high, I'll be interested to see like does he have the speed to kind of fly from sideline to sideline in the way that you have to. So that probably is the biggest question mark surrounding him right now. But in terms of where he's at in the pecking order, like I don't really see anybody challenging him for a starting spot.
Yeah, and I like him playing deep and focusing on playing deep right now. I think he just has really good range for a guy that's 6'4". We saw some of that playmaking ability last year. So yeah, I think he's in line for a big year. I have a lot of high hopes for him. How is Dante Thornton's route running looking by Veal Rituals?
I mean, it's fine. Like, I don't think he's not Devonte Adams out there. Obviously, I don't think anybody expected that from him. I think he's really impressed with his physical attributes. Obviously, he's tall. He's almost 6'5". He's fast, probably the fastest player they have on offense, and he's a great athlete. And so, if he can just do a few routes well, he can probably make an impact for you. There's been a lot of slants, a lot of posts. They're trying to expand his route tree a bit. I've seen him running some more curls and some more intermediate routes. He's going to have to do that to be able to consistently be effective in the NFL. But he's a tough cover, and it's OTAs, so cornerbacks can't and defensive backs in general can't quite be as physical as they usually are. So he kind of has more of an advantage than he'll have come training camp. But I think he's looked good so far. I mean, I think I probably have him a little bit ahead of the best right now when it comes to the impact that he's made just at OTAs. I think he just has such a unique kind of combination of skills that he probably has the more upside, just talent wise, if he can put it all together and become a better route runner. And so, definitely something that they're drilling into.
Yeah, I mean, for him, he doesn't need to run a whole route tree to be an effective receiver in the role that is envisioned for him for the Raiders. Like he needs to be able to get off press coverage. I think to me that's the biggest challenge for him is to be able to get off press because that speed's not going to matter if he gets slowed down or stopped at the line of scrimmage. And he's a taller receiver too, so there's a lot of surface area for those corners to work. So he really needs to be savvy with his hands and his feet to be able to get off press coverage. But yeah, like he needs to be able to run a fade ball. He needs to be able to run a deep post. He has to be able to run some comebacks and hitches for when defenses are playing off of him. But if you could do those things and catch the ball consistently, something that Trey Tucker struggled with in year one, then he can make an impact. But to me, it's going to be between him and Trey Tucker for that Z receiver outside role where you're just taking a top off the defense, and it's going to be important. This offense is a bunch of guys that work underneath and are really good at route running in that short to intermediate area. So you need that guy to be able to take the top off the defenses, and it's going to be him or Trey Tucker that really could fill that role in for the Raiders. All right, next question from Kevin Baca. How are they holding training camp in the Mojave Desert in the summer? I know Tashan is enjoying that desert heat on him every single day.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little brown skin, man. I'm usually a little lighter than this, but yeah, no, it wasn't too bad today. But I mean, they've had training camp in Vegas before throughout the years. Like last year was really the first time that since I've covered the team, since they relocated to Vegas, that they did training camp somewhere else. And so it's not really anything new. I know that, Pete Carroll, I believe it was during the combine, he said that they were going to go back to Napa this year, but from what I've heard, it really came down to a financial thing. Like Napa, as much as people like going to Napa, the
Napa would have
facility
been nice.
there,
I loved going
this,
to those Napa camps, man.
yeah, the facility just wasn't really up to NFL standards,
Yeah, it's
and
pretty
I think it would have cost a good chunk of money in order to do that. And I think just the timing of it um, would have been a little bit tough to pull off this year. Same thing with going back to Costa Mesa. And so I think it really just came down to logistics because, if they only could have had access to it for a little bit, they might have had to start training camp here, then go up there, then come back down here. So it just would have been a little bit too all over the place. And so, maybe in the future it'll come back around. But for now, they'll have to power through that Vegas heat. And they do have a really nice. They don't use it too often, to my chagrin, but they do have an inside facility. So if it gets like really, really insanely hot, which it tends to do in Vegas, then they will transition practice to inside. They don't want anybody passing out.
Yeah, some of the high school teams here practice at 6 in the morning to avoid that
Hmm.
heat, so it could get rough. Um, Next question from Richard Waller. As an English fan, it amazes and disappoints me how many away fans are at our home games. How can we improve this? Surely it would help the team to have a partisan home crowd. The simple answer is to win more and attract more of your fans because once the Raiders start losing and some of the fans start losing interest, that's when they start selling their tickets and you have all these away teams coming. But I mean, on a brighter side, at least the team finances are looking nice, even when the Raiders are losing.
Yeah, I mean that's the short answer is win. Like nobody wants to. I mean, if your team sucks and somebody's offering you a crazy amount of money to come cheer for the other team, like you're gonna take that money. Like I would too. But like I guess like you said, the good news is that money, they are making more money, and some fans might be like, I don't care if they make money. Like you should care because that's how they give out
It
big
helps.
signing bonus and get players in free agency and things of that nature that they couldn't do in the past because they were more cash strapped. So it does help the football in the long run. But yes, they would like to see more Raiders fans in there.
All right, next question from Max Main 30. What second year players are going to make the biggest jump in production?
Yeah, I know production is kind of a word we don't really use for offensive linemen, but I think Jackson Powers Johnson could be a guy that makes a big jump this year. I mean, he started off slow last year as he was coming back from a concussion that he suffered during the offseason program. And he's bouncing around into three different positions. He started games at left guard, center, and right guard. He was just going through his rookie growing pains. Coaching staff. He had an offensive coordinator change, an offensive line coach change. So there was a lot of things up in the air, and I think he talked today and he said it's really his first offseason that he can remember being able to just work at center like for an entire offseason and home in on that position and improve his skill set. He said he's gotten in better shape, lost about 10 to 15 pounds. And he's really meshing well with the coaching staff. He's an Oregon guy, so of course he loves Chip Kelly for what he did back in the day. But I think Jackson Powers Johnson is probably the guy that I would look to make a pretty big jump as he takes over full time as a starting center. The rest of that class, I mean, Brock Bowers, I don't know how much more of a jump he could make from being a first team All Pro last season. But maybe another name is
I
was
mean,
it Gustin?
I would expect Bauer's numbers maybe to drop a little bit, which and it doesn't mean like he's a worse player, but like I don't know if the offense is gonna be funneled through him as much as it was before.
And that could be a good thing. I think if he's more efficient and doesn't
Yeah,
need that
exactly.
volume, I think that's a good thing for your offense. But I think maybe Tommy Eichenberg could be another player, a sneaky one that might pop up. I think he was drafted in the fourth round last year, so it's a relatively hot pick. But they really need somebody to step up at linebacker, like in a bad way. And of the young guys, I think he's the one that has the best chance. And so if he can make a jump and get into the mix there at will linebacker, that would go a long way to solidify in the middle of the defense.
Yeah, I like the choice for Jackson Powers Johnson. We talked to Brandon Thorne, who's a O line expert, a couple of pods ago, and he thinks that Jackson Powers Johnson has the potential to be a top 10 center. He said he played a little out of control last season as far as just his aggression, but that's his mindset. So just kind of reeling that in a little bit and playing a little bit more under control and not going for that kill shot every single time. Although we love seeing it on highlights, you just want to see him just reel it in a bit and have that veteran type of game to him. So I have high hopes for him as well. And Tyree Wilson's not a second year player, but his first year he was just trying to catch up and play through that foot injury. I have high hopes for Tyree. I think he's going to be more productive in this next season. Like, what have you seen from him? Does he look like a guy that's coming into this season in better shape? It's hard to tell because they're not making any contact right now. But have you seen him and what do you think about how he looks so far?
I mean, I think he always looks good in terms of his physique. I don't really think that's the issue with him.
There's pictures of him floating around that looks like he's gained like another 10 pounds. Like, does he look like that, or maybe the picture just making him look
I
that
don't
way?
know, man. It's been off-season gate with Tyree Wilson and his weight. I remember in the second year, it's like, he's so much bigger now. As he pretty much looks the same. So like, I don't really think so.
Yeah, and with
Um,
him, it's not about physical ability. Like the physical ability is there. Like he's big, fast, lengthy. It's about his technique, his get off, his hand usage. If all those things get consistent, he's going to be a really good player for the Raiders. All right. So we got a couple of questions from the chat. Is Spy Tech heavy on analytics from Raiders Lee?
yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, he used it during Tampa Bay. I believe it was at the combine. He was talking about starting to explore ways to use AI. Even that's a whole other level of analytics that I don't really know how that works yet. I don't think they know how that works yet, but he's interested into looking into it and player modeling and putting together the comp pick formula and things of that nature. So he's definitely big on analytics. I think he used to work with these back with the Denver Broncos back when they won Super Bowl 50 back in the day. And so yeah, they have familiarity from their time there. And so it's something that he hasn't been a GM yet, but it's something that, he used during his processes with the Bucks. And in the offseason, they've done the same on the personnel side.
I like Spy Tech a lot. I mean, it just seems like he's saying all the right things. We'll see how it plays out, but it seems like having a guy that is forward thinking and open to just new ideas, leading your team and being in that position seems like a good thing. Um, from Jonathan Murdano, fans have been talking about Amari Cooper. Any substance to those fan rumors?
Uh, I don't think so. I mean, it seems like they're pretty content with allowing this group that they have to see who rises to the top. Between Tucker, Besh, and Thornton, I think they feel pretty confident that they can get another receiver to step up. And starting caliber guy alongside Myers, and They have Bowers and Mayer, so they kind of have a unique setup where they can lean on two tight end sets a little bit more if their receivers aren't as good. But I'd be surprised that, OTAs are over next week with mandatory minicamp. Maybe if they get into training camp and the guys just aren't ready yet, at that point, I think maybe you take a look at a veteran guy like Keenan Allen if he's still around, or maybe Amari Cooper if he's still around. But I think they're really hoping that a couple of these young guys step up.
And Mark Cooper looked pretty cooked to me, which is why it's not surprising that he hasn't gotten any. Um, has some nobody has signed him yet. I think Keenan Allen probably has a little bit more in the tank. He was pretty productive for the Bears last season. But yeah, I think adding a veteran to this group would be beneficial. I mean, there's just so much youth in this group, and you're hoping one of these guys break through. But I think adding a veteran could definitely be useful. All right, next question. Sam the Man asks, do you think Wilkins plays this year?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a weird situation. Like Pete Carroll sounded pretty concerned about him when he was talking about him the other day, and like I mean, it's 7 months post injury, and he still like isn't really running and practicing. That's always going to be a concern, and so I think there's from the people I talk to, like there's optimism that he'll be able to get back out there and start practicing in training camp, and hopefully we'll be ready for the start of the season. But it's just hard to predict things when you have these foot injuries with guys that big. So we'll have to see. But they need him out there in a big way. I think that'll really set back the defensive line. Just because they don't really have that much depth at defensive tackle.
Yeah, I think as the Raiders, if any of you guys followed the Raiders for a long time, I think you should always be ready for the worst case scenario. And I'm not saying that I'm reporting on anything. I'm just saying you should be ready for the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is, yeah, he might have to sit out this season. But we'll see. I'm optimistic too. But again, if you prepare your mind for the worst, then if that news hits, it won't hurt as bad. Um, so Tyler Ferrego asks, hi guys, do you guys agree with my schedule prediction for us? The floor is 7-10, and the ceiling is 10-7. I have us at 9-8 to start the Brady regime. Would you agree? Have a great rest of the day. I mean, yeah, that seems like a pretty realistic approach. I think this Raiders team has the pieces to potentially be good, but the depth is what's concerning. So like if there's any injuries, this will a lot rides on Wilkins and whether he could come back. Then we'll see. The depth is the concerning part with this team.
Yeah. Is it? Are we calling it the Brady regime? Like, is that official? Is that what it's called now? It's not the Carroll regime, but yeah. No, I think that's a solid range. I'd be surprised if they don't win at least 7 games. Even with as pessimistic as I seem to be about the roster, like I think having a really sizable coaching quarterback upgrade, and then you would just think that their injury luck on defense would be better than it was last year. I mean, like they've lost damn near the whole defense. I think they should be able to get up seven wins. Like I don't know about the 10-11 range, but I think they end up settling in at about 8 or 9 wins, and they probably miss the playoffs if that's the case. But I don't think it's necessarily a loss if you take a positive step forward this season.
All right, last question from Eagletarian 207. How are the linebackers doing at OTAs?
People have been asking this a lot. Like I don't know if anyone's ever seen OTA practice, but
No contact, so it's hard to
yeah,
tell. And linebacker
linebackers don't
position that
they
requires
don't
contact.
they don't do shit at OTAs. There's no run game. So like when they are playing the run, they essentially take 2 steps to show that they know which gap they would fill, and then they back off because you're not gonna hit or tackle Ashton Genty or any other running back for that matter. And essentially you just see how they perform during 7-on-7 and team drills and pass coverage. And I think they've been okay. Like, I mean, Elena Roberts and Devin White are not stalwarts versus the pass by any means, but it hasn't been like terrible where they're just getting abused. But I think of the linebackers, Eichenberg probably has looked the best in pass coverage. Like I believe not this week, but the week before last, he had a nice pick off of Geno Smith with the backups going against the first team offense. But it's really hard to put too much to the linebacker play or running backs or offensive line or defensive line until training camp. This is really OTAs, like the way I describe it, is really evaluating your secondary and your quarterbacks. That's pretty much the only definitive, not even definitive, but the most valuable insight you can get when it comes to like practice performance. The rest of it is just mostly learning the scheme, showing that you're knowing what you're doing, and sweating out there in the 90-degree sun in Las Vegas. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to tell, even into training camp and preseason, how linebackers are going to play when the bullets are flying and teams are really because like teams and offensive game planners, they 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 game plan around how to make linebackers' life hard, difficult, and they're not going to do that in the preseason. So we'll see how it goes. I think the best hope for Raider fans is if Tommy Eichenberg really steps up his game, and you see him challenging for being part of the rotation, or even challenging for that starting weak side linebacker spot, because we kind of know what Atlanta Roberts and Devin White is at this point of their careers. But Eichenberg, if he's a young guy that steps up, he's a little bit of a mystery box. Maybe he could develop into a good player, and we'll see. But yeah, thanks for the questions. Thank you for joining us on this random live podcast on the Wednesday afternoon. But we'll talk to you guys soon. I think we'll hopefully have a show next week. So make sure you catch that. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube and rate us on Apple and Spotify. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, y'all. Peace.